I'm on stage giving a lecture about regenerative organic farming at a healthcare conference to a bunch of doctors. And it was a very intimidating moment for me. Why was I invited here? And what do I even have to say to these incredibly educated people? And would you believe that by the end of that 45-minute lecture, there was a line from the front of the room to the back of the room. One by one, these doctors had so many questions from me. Right now, everyone wants to demonize tillage, right? That sort of tillage is the enemy.
Yeah.
But actually what we're learning through our research is that tillage is a tool. Certain types of tillage at the right time can actually unlock certain nutrients in the soil and increase the uptake of those nutrients. Just 100 years ago, almost 100% of the population was involved in agriculture in some way, shape, or form. We were deeply connected to Earth. And today, fast forward to today, only like 1% of our society is actually farming. In a lifetime, we've divorced ourselves from connection to our source. I see a day in the not too distant future where our communities are surrounded by flourishing farms again, and where human beings begin to value food grown in our community and that keeps food in our community. Go take your shoes off and go walk in nature and go walk the roads where your food came from and begin to sense and taste and feel and smell. And come on, you can't argue with your soul.
So everyone, today we have a really, really interesting and special guest, Jeff Tkach, CEO of Rodale. And Jeff is a great guy.
And Rodale is what?
Rodale, and we'll hear what Rodale is. I'll let Jeff explain it. We met, was it 2 years ago?
We met 2 years ago at Rodale Institute.
Yeah, at the Institute, and we had a good connection. I really appreciated our moment together, and I've been thinking about inviting him to the podcast ever since.
Well, it's a true honor to be here today with you, and I am just so overwhelmed by the amazing hospitality and the beauty of the place where you live. And I'm super inspired this morning by the incredible meal we had last night, the conversation, and by what you're doing here. I think what you're doing here is really powerful. And I also want to say a big thank you to you, JM, for your kindness to the Rodale Institute and to the faculty and the students there, and for the way that you've embraced our mission. But I feel like we're like-minded in so many ways, and we're collectively on a mission together. So again, thank you for having me today.
And it's a great pleasure. And I guess you know Chris now because you guys are from the same hood.
We are.
Around New Jersey.
A lot of the same people.
Yeah. So it's great. It's a great connection. Yeah. And okay, well, I'll start up with this, Jeff, because I usually don't do this. We kind of discover people as we tag along. But one of the things why I'm highly interested in our relationship and in you is because I feel that you have a big responsibility, and I admire that. And I want to support it however I can. And so I'm really interested in you sharing what the Rodale Institute is doing, the purpose, the big project behind it, and also the history of where it is. Because a lot of our listeners, they perhaps don't know that, Rodale is really like the first thing to really talk about organic. It was so important in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and 80s. Yeah. The 90s, perhaps a bit less. I don't know the whole story, but
you've given me a lot to work with here. So stop me at any point. But I'd love to just begin to fill in some blanks and paint a picture here.
Yeah.
And so let me just start by saying that the Rodale Institute is widely known as the global leader in regenerative organic agriculture.
Great.
So we were actually established in 1947 as a nonprofit by J.I. Rodale. And the original name for the Rodale Institute was called the Soil and Health Foundation. So think about that. That's super profound in and of itself, that our name 75 years ago was called the Soil and Health Foundation. So essentially, J.I. Rodale was beginning to illustrate for the world that soil health has everything to do with human health, and human health has everything to do with soil health. And so J.I. Rodale was not a farmer. He was actually an entrepreneur, much like yourself. And he was from New York City. He grew up in poverty in Lower Manhattan. During the 1920s, he was raised in an impoverished environment. And what he noticed about his health is that everyone in his lineage, his father, his uncles, they didn't live past the age of 57. And so at a young age, he began to become attuned with the perils of his own health and the lineage of his health. And so he began to go on an all-out search, trying to understand how he could change the trajectory of the genetics that he was inheriting. And so he and his brother actually started a manufacturing company. They were entrepreneurs, and they started having some success. In his early 20s, he was starting to collect some success, some financial success. And it was around that time that he and his brother began asking themselves some questions about how they could really improve the bottom line of their company. And so they moved their company, which had nothing to do with agriculture. They moved their company out from New York City out to Pennsylvania. They moved it to a rural part of Pennsylvania so that they could lower their labor and their overhead and improve the bottom line. And so they moved to Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is where they set up the company. And they found themselves buying another city home in the small city of Allentown. While they were living there, J.I. thought to himself, you know what? I'm now so close to the country. I could almost see the countryside from where I'm living. Why on earth did I buy another city home? So a few years later, he and his wife bought a farm. You've actually been to that farm called the Founders Farm. Yeah. And it sits just on the edge of the Lehigh Valley. And J.I. knew nothing about farming, so he started asking a lot of questions. And he began to quickly realize that he felt that if he could grow his own food and begin to empower himself with healthier food, that could change the health outcome of his life trajectory. So one by one, he started asking the experts, the farming experts, how do you farm? Now, this is a man who wore suits 7 days a week, right? So he would go to the Penn State extension or to the Rutgers extension or to the Cornell extension, and almost to a person, every single expert that he began to talk to about farming said, okay, you want to know something about farming, J.I.? It's really simple. You go out and you buy these things called inputs. You bring them onto your farm. You apply them to your soil. This would have been in the early 1940s, by the way, just to give you the historical context. This is right at the advent of the industrial agricultural revolution. So every one of these land grant extension agents were teaching him about chemical agriculture. And honestly, the original as these men would begin to share their ideas with J.I., they would resonate with him because he understood manufacturing. He owned a manufacturing company. In order to make great products, you had to bring inputs into your facility, your manufacturing plant. So this idea of inputs in, outputs out in agriculture resonated at first, but then he asked the question, well, can someone explain what are these inputs? And one by one, these extension agents would explain the chemicals that were beginning to be introduced into agriculture at that time. And he said his next set of questions were around, okay, well then could someone explain how these chemicals could make my soil healthy and ultimately my food healthy and ultimately me healthy? Yeah. And of course, no one could answer that question. So that's what sent him on his own search, his own quest to understand how we could return to biological agriculture and how biological-based agriculture could ultimately lead to human health. He felt that we were beginning to lose our way as a society, and he was trying to point us back to the health of the soil as the number one driver for human and planetary health. And so that is what led him to start the Soil and Health Foundation, which became the Rodale Institute. And today, fast forward to today, we're now 76 years old, and our time has come. So our organization has gone through a dramatic inflection point over the last 5 to 7 years. We were this sort of silent but diligent nonprofit in rural Pennsylvania doing the long-term science and education of organic farming over the last 7 decades. But all of a sudden, about 7 years ago, our work became in huge demand as the world, I think, has caught up to what Rodale has been espousing for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I'll just end this portion by saying that I described to you a moment ago the land grant system and the perils of that system 75 years ago. And I'm sorry to report that system is no better off today. And in fact, the land grant system, which was originally established by Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s under the Marshall Act, it was designed to give farmers like yourselves access to research and education that was credible and that was helping farmers to prosper. But that system has become largely co-opted by big ag and big chemical companies' interests. And so today, Rodale Institute, I'm humbled to say, is really emerging as a national land grant, really stepping in to fill that void. And we're an independent nonprofit. We're not funded by any chemical company's interests. Yeah. But what we are doing is long-term science, education, and extension for farmers with the goal of helping them to successfully adopt regenerative organic practices.
What is a land grant university and how did that happen?
Yeah, a land grant university, I believe that almost every state, if not every state in the nation, in the United States, has a university that was established to advance science and education and extension or consulting for farmers in that state. So I live in Pennsylvania. You used to live in New Jersey. Pennsylvania has Penn State University. That's our land grant. Rutgers was the land grant.
That's where I went.
Yeah, you went to Rutgers. Okay. So the way that system was designed is that they have satellite offices all throughout the state. And if you're a farmer, presumably you could literally walk in the front door of that extension office or call an extension officer to come out to your farm if you're experiencing a pest problem or a soil health problem, or maybe you have questions about agronomy or how to improve the economics of your farm. In theory, that system was designed to help you. Unfortunately, that system has become largely co-opted. If you go to some of these, like for example, if you go to Penn State, you'll begin to see names like Bayer Chemical on the buildings of those universities because they're endowing that science and they're perpetuating a chemical agricultural model. And so young men and women that grow up in agriculture, presumably in rural parts of our country, often go to those land grant schools to take over the family farm. And they're getting training on large-scale chemical agriculture, whether it's dairy or livestock or grains. They're learning the chemical system. And those land grants are not trying to move us into a better direction by embracing regenerative organic agriculture.
Yeah, and that was a feeling I always had back in New Jersey, just that I knew about the land grant thing and that you could get advice from universities, but it felt pretty irrelevant for what we were doing.
I'm actually told, and it's been a while since I've had to tap into a land grant, but I'm told by one of my colleagues who was a certified organic vegetable farmer in South Central Pennsylvania for a long time, for 14 years. He would say to me, Jeff, I would call the extension office when we were having some sort of a pest issue, and sometimes it would be 3 weeks until I would get a call back. And at that point, I'd already ripped the crop out and put a new crop in because in farming, we can't wait, right?
Yeah.
We need real-time advice. And I'd like to talk for a moment at some point in this conversation about a new pillar within Rodale. We've actually established our own consultancy, which is now working nationally and even internationally. We're essentially available 24/7. We have a team of 22 full-time experts on staff that are trained in the regenerative organic methodology under the auspices of Rodale. And our team is available now to work with any farmer anywhere in the world to help hold their hand to embrace regenerative organic. And this emergent side of Rodale has become the most in demand for what we do in the world. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting.
Yeah. Obviously, you said so many things that we're going to bounce.
Good.
All over the place because that's the nature of these things, right? They interlock and interweave. They're not chronological things. But let's go back again to the beginning of the history of Rodale, because I think to understand where it is now, it's so helpful to always understand where it came from and how it even got to here. So with J.I., what was it that you think was special about him that made him realize these things? Like to make those connections at that time. It also reminds me of Scott and Helen Nearing. Was he a contemporary of?
I don't know. I don't know if Scott was a contemporary of Rodale. I would imagine so. But here's what I know about J.I. Rodale. I've done my best to read as much that he's written a lot, and I've done my best. And you've been in his library.
Yeah,
it's incredible, right?
It's incredible.
So,
and these are all pre-World War II books.
Correct.
Where you can learn a lot from organic farming.
What I imagine, first of all, he was a super zany guy. He had a really quirky personality. I'm told he was very funny, but had a lot of profundity to him as well. Like I think he was a deeply curious man. I think he was driven by an insatiable curiosity, and he was the kind of person that, for example, his original last name was Cohen. He was of the Jewish faith, but he, was trying to be a successful businessman post World War II. Not a good time. And he felt that, his last name was hindering him in certain business circles. So he was the kind of guy who was like, well, okay, well then I'll just change my name. And so the name Rodale is actually a made up name. He made up the name Rodale. And that's the way he thought. There was nothing that ever stood in the way of his curiosity. And if there was a perceived barrier, he would just push right through that barrier. So when the land grants didn't want to work with him to do science in biological agriculture, he just started his own nonprofit. And then he started a publishing company. So in 1942, actually the publishing company predated the nonprofit. He was so excited about what he was learning on his own home farm, which the Founders Farm, which you visited, JM, is to our knowledge, it's America's first intentionally organic farm. So it's where he began his research, and we still own that property today. And he was so excited by what he was learning on his own home farm about biological agriculture that he started a little newsletter because he wanted to get his findings out to other farmers. And so he bought a mailing list of, I think, 50,000 names, and he started a little publication called Organic Gardening and Farming in May of 1942. And he mailed it out to everyone on that list. And I think he got something like 9 responses. And to JI, he's like, cool. All right, there's 9 people that are in. Let's keep going. And he essentially went on to launch a very successful global publishing company. So the company then grew quite considerably and over the next many decades, and it was a health and wellness-based publishing company, which has touched many lives. I'm sure many people listening today have been touched by the content that came out of his publishing company. Now, the Rodale family has since
died. You want to give names of these magazines?
Sure. So Organic Gardening, Prevention, which became the world's largest health magazine, Men's Health, Runner's World, Bicycling, many books like Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth or The South Beach Diet. Some of these health and wellness publications that changed the hearts and minds of many people around the world was birthed out of the idea of regenerative organic agriculture.
Of soil.
But it all comes back to this connection of soil health and human health.
Yeah.
I think that's wild to think that, like, just me personally thinking of Men's Health magazine in like the 90s and 2000s, like I have a bit of a silly feeling about it because I felt like it was just like 6-pack abs in 10 minutes type of content on the cover. And then I know you worked for them, but that was just what I saw.
No, and same for me. And it is an interesting correlation. I think my history with the Rodale family is that I was touched. I actually grew up, I had a very similar story to J.I. Rodale. I grew up in suburbia, suburban America, to 2 wonderful parents. But my earliest memories as a young boy were of being sick. I was sick all the time from the age 6 to 13. Constant trips to the doctor's office. And never felt good as a kid. My earliest memories were just feeling complete malaise all the time. And around the age of 13, I had sustained an injury and was forced to stay home from school for a few months. And an infomercial came on the television in the early 90s for a magazine called Men's Health. And I remember asking my mom to buy me a copy of that magazine next time she went to the store. And at the time, I would argue that in the early 90s, Men's Health was a very service journalism oriented magazine. It was very much about practical health for men. It was trying to get men that were very sedentary and like sort of beer drinkers, meat eaters, to just begin to introduce healthy, tangible steps in their life. And I remember reading the magazine as a 13-year-old and getting so inspired by it that my next assignment to my mom was to give her a grocery list. And I said, next time you go to the store, I want to start eating these foods. So buy me all these foods because this is what the magazine told me I should eat if I want to be healthy. And over the course of that next several months, I completely changed my health. I lost all this weight, got off all these medicines. And that became such a cornerstone moment of my life because I began to realize that I was empowered to do something about my health. I could change the outcome of my health. And I think that J.I. Rodale probably felt the same when he began to change his diet, when he bought a farm and he began to use these techniques and started eating differently. He changed the outcome of his health. And I connected with that deeply. And I didn't know at the time when I was 13 that there was a company called Rodale behind this magazine. I just knew I read a magazine and the magazine told me some things and I did those things and they changed the trajectory of my health as a teenager. And then fast forward to going to university, I graduated from university and I knew I wanted to pursue something in health. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you go to work for Rodale? And I said, well, what's Rodale? And they explained to me it was a publishing company that made a magazine called Men's Health. And I had never put 2 and 2 together until that time. So I joined the publishing company in 2001 and ended up having about a 16-year journey through the publishing company, which ultimately led me to connect with the nonprofit called the Rodale Institute. And it was work that just tugged deeply on my soul. And I knew that that was the next stage of my journey was to join the nonprofit and really help it at a critical inflection point.
So you understood that taking ownership of your health felt like a personal revolution. Right?
Very much so.
And when was the first time that you made the connection, though, that from health to farming, health to ag? Because it seems, and from what I saw online, like I've caught some podcast of you on like health podcast, basically. Mm-hmm. So you clearly come at this from a very health perspective. And we can get more into that. But what was like the moment in which you saw that idea of, soil health is human health, and like where was the connection point?
Yeah, well, I would say it was an evolution and that started at that age of 13, but then it progressed, all through my teens and into during college. I actually lived above a health food store. I had a little apartment, like a little studio apartment above a health food store in the town where I went to university. And That was in the late 90s, right as the National Organic Program came online, and you began to see foods labeled organic in the health food store. And I remember buying those foods. I was always the weird college kid, like, eating health food.
Kale.
Exactly. While everyone's out drinking beers and eating burgers, I was beginning to get super curious about food around that time. And then fast forward to going to work for the Rodale Publishing Company, I became indoctrinated by the mission of organic farming. In 2006, I started having some success early on in my early 20s in publishing. I guess I was pretty good at what I did, and I got noticed inside the company, and I got put in charge of organic gardening when I was 26 years old. So the magazine Organic Gardening had gone through a huge growth and then a maturation and then a decline. And I took over as advertising director in 2006 at a time when the magazine was really floundering and struggling financially. And that was a really good time. If you remember, in the mid 2000s, that's when all the big multinational food companies started buying up these small organic food brands, and they started taking out advertising. And I would go from Chicago to LA to New York to San Francisco, and I'd meet with all these ad agencies, and I would convince them that if you really want to capture the hearts and minds of the core audience of organic food, you should advertise in Organic Gardening magazine, because that's where the diehard organic people are reading. That's what they're reading. And so one by one, General Mills and Subaru and Kellogg's and all these advertisers started buying advertising in organic gardening, and we were able to transform the brand and give it a whole new life. And so from 2006 to 2013, I served as advertising director, then publisher of that magazine. And it was in those years that I started visiting the Rodale Institute, which was located 20 miles from the publishing company. And one by one, these CEOs of these organic food companies would want to come visit Rodale Institute. They wanted to see the mothership. They wanted to see the place that inspired them. Many of these founders of food companies were readers of organic gardening over the decades. And so they wanted to visit sort of the homeland of where this movement all began. And at a young age, I got to meet all these amazing thought leaders and founders. And I think it was over a long period of time that I just became more and more indoctrinated by the mission and more curious. And it's just been a sort of a lifelong journey.
It's interesting because a lot of people get the health trigger in their life, but they never make it to farming. They kind of stay in supplement world and like that kind of zone of thinking about health. I feel like there's
training.
Well, there's actually another piece to this story.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So in 2016, I had kept going. I had kept following this curiosity, and I got to know the leadership at the Rodale Institute. And Jeff Moyer was made CEO in 2015. If many of you listening probably know of Jeff's work, he's an icon in our industry and a true pioneer and an innovator in many ways. And Jeff had been with the Rodale Institute for many decades, and he was finally made CEO in 2015. And I believed so much in him and his vision and his leadership. And I got invited to be on the board of directors of the organization as a volunteer. And within a year of that, I fell very ill again. So this was now the second time in my life where I became very, very sick. And it came out of this time. It came out of nowhere, because I've always prided myself in being a healthy, active adult, and always took great care of myself. But I fell sick and mysteriously ill. And I actually had to go on medical leave for the first time in my life, and I ended up bedridden for 3 months. And was going back and forth to all these conventional doctors, and not one of them could help me. Not one of them could even diagnose what was the root cause of my health collapse. And I was experiencing like flu-like symptoms that just never went away. So imagine having the flu, but for like 3 months.
Whoa.
And it was like the worst flu of your life. And so finally, oddly enough, Jeff Moyer said, well, have you ever heard of something called functional medicine? And I said, no, what's that? And he said, it's kind of like the organic farming of the medical community. You know, these are doctors that are trained to find the root cause, and then they try to use, biological methods to treat that root cause. And he said, my wife and I see this incredible doctor, and you should go see him. I think he might be able to help you. And I went to see Bill. His name is Bill, this doctor, and I got in to see him actually rather quickly. He was able to get me an appointment. And he spent 2 hours with me that morning, which when is the last time you went to the doctor?
Yeah,
and the
right.
doctor spent more than 10 minutes with you.
Yeah.
So this doctor spent 2 hours with me just trying to do a whole assessment of myself and my my life and all that unfolded. And he ended up pinpointing through the work that we did together that I had Lyme disease. And I was so relieved to finally have been given a diagnosis. And then I said, okay, now what pill do I take? What pharmaceutical, how do I get rid of Lyme disease? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, this isn't like, there's no silver bullet to this. You have chronic Lyme disease, which is now systemic in your body. And it's not like we can just give you an antibiotic and you're going to be better in 10 days. He's like, this is going to be a process. He's like, it's kind of like, I'll never forget this. He said, it's kind of like farming. He's like, we're going to start rebuilding your body from the ground up. And sure enough, I worked with him over the course. It took about a year to work with him, and I made massive changes to my diet, my lifestyle, and we use all kinds of herbal products and other non-traditional, non-conventional healthcare remedies. And little by little, I got healthier and I got better. And so that was really the most critical, eye-opening moment of my life when I began to draw parallels between the collapse and the perils of our healthcare system with our conventional agricultural system. And I saw how regenerative healthcare was really aligned with regenerative organic farming. And that was really like a crucible moment for my life, where I began to see that these things happened for me. This terrible health collapse happened to open my eyes to a whole new road forward in my life. So that's what brought me to where I am today.
Do you notice the parallel with J.I. Rodale asking the land grants how he can, like what they can do for him, and you went to the doctors, what can you do for me? And they only give you the inputs. And I don't know, the connection there, it's uncanny how.
Yeah.
And what a perfectly illustrated full circle of like entering this world through health and then kind of going through it for a while through men's health and like kind of thinking more from the fitness and just eating healthy foods. But where do those healthy foods come from? And the way it circles all the way back, I don't know, that's amazing. Well, it's a picture perfect kind of.
It's a picture perfect when you end up being healthier, because when you're not, it's really like that feeling of not knowing what's wrong.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have lived through that. They're like, I just don't feel right. I don't feel good. And I don't know how to get better. And they're trying all these things. But until you have someone that really tells you that's what you have and that's how you can get better, that really clears the process.
Yeah. Well, it's through this work, I've been so fortunate to connect so many dots in my life and bring it all together under this incredible work that I'm honored and humbled to do at this moment in our history. But one thing I'd like to mention, because I think it's appropriate at this point in our conversation, is that over the first couple of years of me joining I joined the Rodale Institute full time as an employee July 1st, 2017. And within a year or two, I started building a network of incredible people like you both. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how many medical leaders and doctors have been attracted to the mission of Rodale during my tenure. So much so that about 4.5 years ago, I was invited to speak at an international accredited medical conference. So, a lot of doctors get invited to go to these continuing education conferences where they learn from experts in healthcare, and they have to sit in these. Oftentimes they're at some hotel conference room in a city where doctors sit indoors for a couple of days and listen to a bunch of lecturers on stage, and they eat terrible food and probably get a couple sleepless nights in the hotel. And I got invited to one of these conferences in downtown Oakland, and I'm on stage giving a lecture about regenerative organic farming at a healthcare conference to a bunch of doctors. And it was a very intimidating moment for me, because I'm like, what on earth? Why are these people even interested in this topic? Why was I invited here? And what do I even have to say to these incredibly educated people? And would you believe that by the end of that 45-minute lecture, there was a line from the front of the room to the back of the room. It was a big conference room of one by one. These doctors had so many questions for me. And I was so humbled by that. And as I drove away from that conference to go to the airport, I thought to myself, well, what if we could get all those doctors onto a farm and host a healthcare conference on a farm and get these doctors' hands in the soil and actually really teach them about it? If they're curious about agriculture, why don't we teach them about agriculture? So we came up with an idea called what if Rodale Institute would launch the regenerative healthcare conference. And so 3 years ago, we received some grant funding to launch our first our founding conference, and Dr. Mark Hyman came and gave the keynote, and we had 430 doctors from around the world apply from 7 countries. We only accepted 75 into our initial cohort, And it was one of the most profound experiences of my life to watch these doctors come and learn about agriculture. And, on the second day, they were in the field with Dan, Dan Kemper, our master trainer, and they're literally digging potatoes out of the ground with their hands. And then that night we sat around a table, and these chefs came in and made this incredible meal with those potatoes that we harvested that morning. And it was just this profound experience. And from there, we ended up learning that many doctors ended up resigning from their conventional medical professions to go on and do more regenerative healthcare oriented things. So now we have an annual conference called the Regenerative Healthcare Conference. Our next one will be this September, and we do it at the Rodale Institute. So that's an example of how I've been able to harness a very terrible experience with my own health and somehow it inspired this idea to actually educate doctors about farming.
This episode is brought to you by Bootstrap Farmer. Bootstrap Farmer is an amazing company. It's focused on making high quality, durable, and ecological products for farmers and gardeners. They really stand out for me because one, they manufacture their product right in the US instead of relying on overseas factories. And two, they're focused on durability and sustainability. This means no single-use plastics that you have to rebuy every year and no cheap, flimsy metal that won't last. Their hoop house kits are among the best out there, made of super thick galvanized steel that will stand out to the elements and last you a very long time, I guarantee it. And their seeding trays are absolutely indestructible. Believe me, we did a test here at the farm. A car ran over the trays and they literally didn't even deform. On top of that, the Bootstrap team is passionately dedicated to seeing the farming community grow and thrive. And that really means so much to me. That's why I do what I do here at the Market Gardener Institute. So if you care about what kind of companies you support with your dollars, check out Bootstrap Farmer. You can find them out at bootstrapfarmer.com. Thank you, Bootstrap, for all you do. Love you guys. See you soon.
Do you know how other ways that any of those doctors changed their practice? Like, how did they implement if they're so excited about it? Obviously, you said some of them left, but do you know? Like, did you get any?
Yeah, it's our understanding that on average, the average general practice doctor sees about 1,100 patients a year. So if you think about it, that one conference had the potential to touch up to 80,000 people. One conference, 75 attendees, 80,000 people. And so the stories range from people literally leaving their medical practice to go start a functional medicine clinic, to other attendees that actually worked with the president of their hospital to start an organic farm at their hospital, to other attendees, literally starting food as medicine programs in their community. So I think it's been a very sort of unbelievable thing to learn about how one conference could transform so many hearts and minds to begin reinventing healthcare.
Yeah, it's we rarely talk about this, but it's such a big topic. Like, reestablishing small-scale farming and regenerative farming is like definitely key, but also the healthcare system is so broken.
Yeah,
so broken.
Rodale actually, we do research, education, and consulting. Those are our three core pillars. But we also have programs. There's programs that are inspired by our mission that usually bubble up through a partner that comes to us with a big, bold idea, and then we get that idea funded, and then we launch a program, like our healthcare conference. But 10 years ago, we were approached by a regional hospital on the border of Pennsylvania and New Jersey called St. Luke's. And together, Rodale and St. Luke's started, to our knowledge, the first ever certified organic farm-to-hospital program in the nation.
Nice.
So Rodale now manages a 14-acre certified organic farm. We have employees that are Rodale employees that work at the hospital every day, and they grow food, and all the food grown on that farm ends up on the plates of patients in that hospital, but also on the plates of employees' lunches. They get to consume the food in the concession when they have lunch or on break. And then we also have an employee CSA, so employees can purchase CSA shares and take it home to their family. So we're actually bringing healthcare to healthcare, which is quite profound.
No, and it's one of the most obvious glaring blind spots that even people that don't know a lot about farming can see, like getting Jell-O and some other crap while you're in a hospital. Like, I am sick and you're giving me basically junk food. So
these people wake up from surgery that they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on, and they wake up to like a bowl of Frosted Flakes and some orange juice. It's like, wait, how is that going to heal me?
It's crazy.
Thanks for the bowl of inflammation this morning.
To segue very neatly, I think, into what Rodale is doing now, because that's where I want to go now. All the things that Rodale is doing now. On the theme of health, an obvious question one might ask is like, what do you mean? We mean that this produce, that this farming is healthier. How do we know this? And I heard some evidence-based, researchers telling me that the conventional stuff is it's perfect. It's the organic is no good. Blah, blah. Like I hear this. I hear quote unquote evidence-based researchers say that there's absolutely no difference in nutrition, blah, blah, blah. So,
or simply if chemicals were harmful, then we wouldn't allow them.
Yeah.
And it's just pretty conventional thinking. It's like if it was unhealthy, then it wouldn't be available for us to eat. That's what people think.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I would answer that. I would answer the question with a question. And the question is, is 10,000 microorganisms in 1 teaspoon of healthy soil indicative of life? So yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, we know that healthy soil is alive. It's teeming with life.
Yeah.
And if there's life in the soil, then there's nutrients in the soil. If there's nutrients in the soil, there's nutrients in the food. If there's nutrients in the food, the human is healthy. Isn't that to me, that's just intuitive, right? And we know that when we begin to apply synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides to plants, that we actually kill the mycorrhizae. We know there's evidence. We know that we kill the life in the soil when we apply these harmful chemicals. That's just, to me, not only do we know that scientifically, but it's also intuitive. These, genetically modified fruits and vegetables are designed to survive the application of the herbicide or the pesticide or the fungicide. They're designed, and they're also, everything else that surrounds that plant, it dies. That's how that works. Yes or no? Correct?
Correct.
Okay, so isn't it sad that we have to do science to prove that foods grown in a regenerative, organic manner are healthier? Like, to me, that's just a sad reality. And in spite of that, Rodale is conducting long-term science to prove that foods grown using regenerative organic methods are more nutrient dense. So we have a 44-year study called the Farming Systems Trial that was established in 1981 by Robert Rodale, who was the son of J.I. Rodale. Many would argue that Bob Rodale was even more contemporary than his father, even more visionary. Bob Rodale was an incredible, incredible human being. And he worked with food leaders in our industry to establish long-term science because they wanted to get an organic certification. They wanted the federal government to house that standard under the USDA because they wanted to bring credibility to organic. And our federal government at the time really said, well, listen, we can't create legislation around an organic certification unless there's science to prove that organic agriculture is even a real viable production method. Also kind of sad that we needed to do science to substantiate that. But nevertheless, Robert Rodale came back to Pennsylvania and he started the Farming Systems Trial, which you've seen, JM.
Yeah.
This is a long-term research that is evaluating conventional and organic grain cropping systems. And over the course of that 44 years, Rodale, through our science, which has been peer-reviewed many, many times, has proven that organic and conventional, first of all, when we're talking about yields, which all farmers want to know about yields, the question is, can organic feed the world? And our long-term systems trial has proven that organic and conventional yields are about the same. They're about equal over 4 decades. Okay, so if you have to look at biology over a long term, because you and I, our biology doesn't change much over 1 year or even 3 years, but we look and feel and are different over a long period of time. So yields are about the same, except for years of extreme drought or extreme wet, which we're seeing more erratic weather. And in those extreme weather periods, we're seeing yield increases in the organic systems up to 30%. So we can produce up to 30% more yield during these extreme weather periods, which we're having more and more of. Well, we're also doing that while releasing 45% fewer carbon emissions into the atmosphere. So the organic systems are healthier for the climate. We're also able to sequester more carbon in the soil in the organic systems. We're able to get water to infiltrate deeper and deeper into the organic system. So when it rains, the soil can hold that water and store it for dry periods. And we're also proving that we're also releasing fewer carbon emissions into the air. But I think most important is that the farming systems trial has illustrated that farmers can earn up to 3 to 6 times more profit.
Yeah, because
So
of the cost of input.
That is correct. And so our recent economic data is actually showing that if you were to strip the organic premium out of the economic model, right? So we know that an organic grain crop is going to earn 3 times more on the commodity market, right? Because organic feed is expensive. But if you were to take the price premium out simply on production, so by eliminating inputs, improving soil health, we can actually show a better return to farmers without the price premium, which I think is amazing. That says it all right there.
Yeah.
So that's an example. And then more recently, we've started another long-term systems trial called the Vegetable Systems Trial about 8 years ago. And that study is setting out to compare the nutrient quality of food, vegetable crops like you grow here on your farm, based on how that food was produced. So we're actually beginning to put science to substantiate that organic food is simply more nutrient dense. And the spoiler alert is that the data that is coming out is recent and not quite fully peer reviewed and not published yet because it's a new study. But early indications are there are extreme differences in nutrients.
You want to explain, Jeff, nutrient dense?
Sure.
What does that mean, and why is that word kind of becoming a buzzword now?
Yeah. So a lot of people are talking about the nutrient density or nutrient quality of food. And so we know that today, as we degrade the health of the soil at large scale, we're eroding the nutrient density. So we're eroding the nutrient density of food. So in other words, a carrot today is not the same as a carrot that was grown, say, 40 years ago. Through chemical, conventional agricultural methods, we're degrading the life of the soil. Therefore, the nutrients, like the micronutrients, like even things like magnesium. We know that as a society, we're becoming more and more magnesium deficient. Well, why is that? Well, because magnesium is chelated. It's synthesized in the soil. That's where a plant would take up magnesium. And so the way it gets into our body is it comes through the plant, through the photosynthesis process. And through industrial agriculture, we're degrading nutrients in the soil so they're not making their way into the plant. And so Rodale is now we're now able to show this and put data to it through a long-term trial. And we're able to show that when you grow food, by first and foremost focusing on the health of the soil, so using cover crops, by reducing your tillage, by
crop
rotations, of course, and building biodiversity below ground, you can begin to impact the nutrient quality of the food itself.
Any takeaways so far? I know it's not all peer reviewed and published, but is there anything that you can say?
Yeah, so one thing that stands out to me, and Dr. Gladys Zanotti is the director of this research, and I notice you have our website up here. If you hover over the science tab, you'll actually be given an option to go to the vegetable systems trial, and you can go deeper. That's Gladys right there.
I actually did.
Okay, cool. So this goes deep into the science itself, but one thing that really stood out to me, Gladys recently presented her most recent data, and she was showing that there are certain types of tillage. So right now, everyone wants to demonize tillage, right? That sort of tillage is the enemy.
Yeah.
But actually, what we're learning through our research is that tillage is a tool, just like a crop rotation or compost. It's a tool that can be done appropriately and at the right time. And what one of the most surprising things we learned is that certain types of tillage at the right time can actually unlock certain nutrients in the soil and increase the uptake of those nutrients. So Rodale is not demonizing tillage. I know there's this big no-till movement out there, which is a conversation we should get into at some point today. But
fascinating.
This is fascinating that we're learning that actually tillage in vegetable production can be a tool, and we're trying to use this long-term trial to also eliminate things like black plastic. Like, let's not give there's a lot of innovation that still needs to be done in regenerative organic farming. Like right now, our vegetable producers around the world rely on black plastic, which has huge deleterious environmental implications. Rodale is looking at ways that we can use cover crops and green mulch to completely eliminate black plastic as an example.
Yeah.
So not only is the study looking at nutrient density, but it's also looking at production methods so that the farmers you're teaching through your work can bring new best practices to bear.
That's not a for sure thing, because the black plastic is really convenient in many ways. It's not an easy battle. Like
No.
it's going to take some really good, like planting a cover crop, roller crimping it, and then planting into it is not so.
No, and we know that. So
yeah.
Rodale's, that we're trying to work ahead. We're trying to look into the future and say, okay, what are farmers? What are the challenges? What are your struggles? Where are their need for innovations, and how can Rodale help to unlock those innovations? So we do a lot of work in cover crops, as you know, and we know that system is not perfect. So we're looking for perfection, and we're constantly looking to tweak and hone. And until then, you're right. Like organic farmers do need to rely on things like black plastic, and that doesn't have to be a deleterious thing.
But this is great because it speaks to the idea that like it's not up to the farmer individually to necessarily get rid of plastic from their farms.
Or to reinvent the farming.
Yeah.
Like, that's, there's so many, like we're talking about the ag extension agents and the universities that were supposed to be doing that work, which they aren't, which is why Rodale and others are there. Like, that's why we're here at the Institute, at the Market Gardner Institute also. But
Yes.
it's like, it's enough to ask of a farmer, of a grower, to just be profitable, productive, yielding high quality produce, but to ask him to invent how to do this is a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And the research, and they should be there to tell you best practice of how to do this.
But this is why the work of Rodale is so important at this moment, in history, because you're right. The land grants aren't doing this.
Yeah.
And Rodale is setting out to do the impossible, frankly. This is really hard work. And by the way, all of our research is self-funded. So our team of scientists are the best in the world at what they do, and they give up university life. You've met them.
Yeah, I've met them. I'll tell you, man. I don't know how to say this, and they're very, I don't want to say geeky, but like very like scientific.
Most people are proud to be geeky if they are.
Yeah, it's like
soil nerds for sure.
It's
Come on.
like, for me, like I was listening to them, and I was like, wow, like I've been farming for 20 years, and you're blowing my mind. I don't know what you're talking
You're
about.
not going to meet more passionate, intelligent, emboldened, visionary scientists than those that come on staff at Rodale, and they give up, all the promises of tenure and all the promises of academia, and endowed chairs. Many of these scientists, if they were working at the University of Iowa or Iowa State or Penn State, they would have endowed chairs where their research is funded in perpetuity. They don't have to write grants. At Rodale, these scientists come on a prayer, in the hope that someone is going to notice their science and want to fund it.
Yeah.
And so that's true leadership.
Jeff, I want to ask you something, because as now the leader of Rodale, carrying a big mission, how vocal are you about talking about these issues that, like let's say, who's funding these universities and the other projects? Are you vocal on that end, or are you kind of more vocal about what you guys are up to and why it's important?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think Rodale Institute, we've been around for 75 years, I think, for a reason. And it's because we've quietly and humbly went about our work.
Okay.
Just setting a vision and remaining stoic and unwavering in that vision, and not trying to draw a lot of attention. We're not an activist organization. We're a science organization. And I think Rodale has always attempted to be the voice of reason. And right now, it's very noisy in our world, right? There's a lot of people clamoring to make their case, or to clamor on about some activist message. And I think under my leadership, I want to go even deeper into the humility. I want to just keep quietly and humbly doing our work. And I believe that the work will stand on its own. And if enough people like you come around us to help tell our story will permeate. And I will share with you that just in the last 5 years, our phones have begun to ring from some of the biggest food companies in the world. And Rodale today, right now, we have team members that are working with farmers, for example, in General Mills' supply chain. General Mills is one of the most influential food companies in the world.
Yeah.
And they have called upon Rodale to work with farmers in their wheat, oat, and tomato supply chain. So farmers that are growing those three products for General Mills, General Mills wants to move in our direction, but they came to us and said, we don't know how to implement the organic no-till system at scale. Can you teach us? And so one by one, these multinationals are calling Rodale. And by the way, we're not publicizing that. We're not looking to promote that as some grand gesture. We're just doing the work.
Yeah.
And you've met some of our amazing team members. They're literally on the farms of General Mills every day.
Yeah, helping. Stewarding.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's how we advance our mission, is just one farm at a time.
Okay. So I'm asking you tough questions, but how about the regenerative not organic, like that. The other word is not connected to it.
Yeah.
How do you go about, talking about this? How do you go about explaining the difference? How do you go about advocating for adding the organic to it?
I think it's helpful at this moment to just give you both a little history. A lot of people would credit J.I. Rodale with coining the term organic. I know that's up for debate, but J.I. Rodale really began to use the word organic as it relates to agriculture through all of his writing and publishing in the 1940s. And then along comes his son, Robert Rodale, who took over in 1971. And Bob Rodale was a world traveler. He loved to visit farms all over the world. He spent a lot of time in Africa and Asia and Russia. And it was he was doing a lot of his travel at a time when people were beginning to use the word sustainable agriculture. He hated that word. He felt like the word sustainability as it relates to farming didn't work, because he would see these farms where the soil health was completely degraded, where farmers were failing economically. They were having crop failure because of drought. Because there was famine, and he thought to himself, there's nothing here to sustain.
No.
He said, but if we as farmers begin to refocus all of our efforts on the health of the soil, if we make soil health our number one priority, then guess what? We're going to begin to grow healthy crops. Plants are going to flourish, and the people consuming those plants, they're going to get healthier. We're going to begin to rebuild biodiversity. We're going to begin to impact the climate. We're going to begin to create microclimates. The entire region where our farm is located, everything in that system is going to get better and better and better over time. And he saw that as continuous improvement, that our job as farmers is to continuously improve the health of our farm through the soil. And so he called it regenerative. So J.I. Rodale, organic, Robert Rodale, regenerative. And so today, Rodale espouses regenerative organic agriculture. We helped co-author what is now the regenerative organic certification, which is the newest, most in our minds, it's the highest bar standard in agriculture. It's governed by the Regenerative Organic Alliance. I'm actually a board member of the ROA. And so Rodale believes that you cannot separate the word regenerative from organic. Now, many, many, many people around the world are. And so this word regenerative by itself is becoming a buzzword. And many of these multinational food companies are beginning to greenwash with this word. They're beginning to purport that they have a regenerative ag strategy, which means everything and nothing. So yes, are farms at scale trying to make moves to reduce tillage? Yes. Are farms at scale trying to reduce chemical inputs? Probably. Are farms at scale trying to improve soil health? I hope so. But there's no true definition of the word regenerative unless you're talking about ROC certification. So when Rodale talks about regenerative agriculture, it's a firm stance. We believe that regenerative must be linked to organic, and that's what all farms should be aiming for. So,
do you have?
I like it. I like it. It's very clean. It's very clear. It's very precise.
Is there a hope that the regenerative organic standard will get taken up by USDA or no?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a really great question. First of all, we do not ever want to demonize our friends at the USDA because, frankly, they helped get us to where we are today. You know, when we walk into a grocery store and we buy a certified organic product, that standard is governed by the USDA. Is it perfect? No. Has there been fraudulent activity that has been uncovered? Sure. But by and large, it is one of the most audited standards in our food industry, and it can be trusted. And the USDA and the Organic Trade Association and many other partners are working very hard to make sure that there's 100% accuracy in that standard and to get to the bottom of fraudulency. So we're making big strides. And so Rodale applauds the USDA, and frankly, we want to continue to be good partners to them. And the point of ROC is that any farm that goes for that certification must first achieve its organic certification. So I would say, we think that every farm should be organic, but the ROA is independent. We do not house that standard inside of the USDA because it's a high bar standard and because it's new and innovative and because we're trying to push the bar.
We had Dave Chapman. I don't know if you know Dave Chapman from the Real Organic Project, and he was explaining to Chris and I that hydroponics were now allowed to be certified organic in the USDA model, and that that was like a tipping point where a lot of growers, a lot of farmers were like, well, that doesn't relate to soil. That doesn't relate to everything that we've been talking about. And that kind of opened up that space of being kind of like, okay, are these folks at the USDA on our side or not?
Yeah, and I'd say that was the tipping point for Rodale to step out and join others to form the Regenerative Organic Alliance. You know, Rodale does not believe that hydroponic agriculture should be credited as organic. You can't replicate 10 billion microorganisms in 1 teaspoon of healthy soil. So we believe that soil-based agriculture is concurrent with organic. So I think I would agree with Dave, and then, you know, that's why Rodale chose to step out and to assert ourselves, and because we're trying to influence and push the USDA to change their minds on that. And we really hope that someday we can correct that, because that was not a good move for organic as a whole.
And so all this means that Rodale, a big part of the impact you want to have is transitioning farmers, correct?
That is our number one mission, is to transition farmers and farmland to regenerative organic production.
So can we talk about how you make that happen, and also some success? Because like you mentioned the consultancy you're doing, which seems like a big step forward. And because we all understand, and well, maybe not everyone, but we had Beth Hunter on, and she was explaining, you know, for like the number one reason people don't transition is it's costly for them to do, and it's hard, and they're afraid, and they don't know it. And well, maybe there's a lot of reasons. I don't know the number one, but
no, you just saw me light up there, because I think that's consistent with what we hear as well. The number one reason that keeps farmers stuck in a conventional system is lack of knowledge. How do I do it? Can someone give me a step-by-step guide? Listen, I want to earn a higher price premium. I want healthier soil. No farmer wakes up in the morning and says, I want to make people sick.
Yeah.
Farmers wake up every day believing in what they do to the core of their being. And they believe, they take great pride. I'd say farmers take more pride in their work than maybe any other profession in the world. They're working with nature every day. So farmers, I think, want to move in a better direction, but they're stuck in a broken system because there's not a knowledge base there to guide them. And so really cool story. About 5 years ago, you know, as we were doing some strategic planning for Rodale, we realized that we've been doing this long-term science. And we've done quite a bit of training and education over the years, but we never really had a mechanism to take the science off of our farm and translate it onto other farms, like an extension agent. And it was at a time, so this was in 2017, we became good acquaintances with our State Department of Agriculture. Rodale's based in Pennsylvania, and we were beginning to form an alliance with our State Department of Ag, under the leadership of Secretary Redding, who's still our leader today. And he was appointed by Governor Wolf, our former governor, at a time when they were doing some hard analysis of Pennsylvania agriculture, which is our number one industry in the state. And there's a lot of struggling farmers, as you know, a lot of conventional dairy farmers in Pennsylvania that were going out of business. They were struggling to earn a living off of a 300-acre dairy farm when they're competing with 15,000-acre dairy farms in the Midwest. And so Governor Wolf and Secretary Redding thought, well, what if we could begin moving these farms to organic? Because Pennsylvania at the time was the number 2 ranking organic state in the nation. And there's over 1,600 certified organic farms. And those farms, when they did the economic analysis of those farms were much more lucrative and profitable. So Governor Wolf said, well, what if we could begin to make Pennsylvania more of a leader in organic? And what if we can get farms to transition? So they sat down with our leadership, myself included, and we thought, well, what if we could fund a position at Rodale, a full-time employee whose job it would be to go out and work across the state to help hold the hand of farmers and give them the knowledge they need and access to markets and all the tools that they would need to be successful. So that year, in 2018, Governor Wolf authored, which became the first ever state-driven farm bill in the history of America. So this is a state farm bill, and one of the 6 pillars of the farm bill was to transition our farms to organic. So the state of Pennsylvania gave Rodale a very modest grant to hire a full-time employee, who you know, Sam Malriott, who's the director of our consultancy. Yep. We hired him, we trained him under the auspices of Rodale and gave him all the tools and best practices to begin going out and helping farmers at scale. And we didn't know if anyone would call us to ask for our help. So we announced that this service was a free service to any farm in the state. Today, we have over 160 farms 4 years later that are working with us to transition. So from 0 to 160 farms in 4 years. That team now is working nationally. We now have 21 full-time employees who are working all across the country with over 600 farms and clients, ranging anything from a 1-acre urban farm all the way up to General Mills, everything in between. So Rodale has built this emergent arm where we are in such demand. This service is in such demand because we're filling such a significant void.
What about small scale ag? I just to connect it to kind of us and stuff and you, JM, like, there's this one component of transitioning large scale ag to a better ag, which I think we all agree, like, yes, we have to have this happen. But there's also this idea of multiplying of some more small farms and creating more communities. And that's kind of what we're really passionate about is where we live and you've now been here in this little area that we live in. And it's about way of life. It's about community cultures, lifestyle. Like it's deeper than just the nutrients of the food So
you guys are creating a new world. I mean, in my mind, you're at the leading edge of where the world is going. And, Rodale commends your vision and your leadership for your philosophy on agriculture. Rodale we're very aligned. That's why we launched the regenerative organic certification, because it's a very high bar.
Yeah.
And the farmers that are going to achieve that standard the fastest are the kind of farmers that you and I work with. So yes, Rodale is trying to impact big acreage because we have to, because the clock is ticking. And we have to move large-scale commodity farming to a better way because that's where the acres are right now. At the same time, we need to usher in a whole new generation of farmers that are going to begin to create a more regionalized, food-secure society. And at Rodale, we have our RIFT program, our Rodale Institute Farmer Training, which, frankly, a lot of our inspiration comes from you both. Rodale is teaching your methodology through our Farmer Training Academy. We have these amazing young men and women that come and spend an entire growing season at Rodale. We have hundreds of applicants that apply to come to our farmer training. It's a 100% scholarship-based program, and we can't scale that fast enough. We need to grow that program. We can only accept about 20 students a year. So our efforts then are also focused on working with small-scale producers across the nation. So our consulting team, not only do we work with large-scale, but frankly, our team really loves to work with the market gardener and the kinds of farmers that you're espousing. That's our sweet spot, and a lot of our experts on our team are helping young and new farmers get established, really learn agriculture. And in many cases, these are first-generation farmers that we're trying to set up for the most amount of success.
Can we talk about COVID and how that connects to this? Because my understanding from things I've heard you talk about is that you really felt that COVID was a big tipping point, especially in this regard, and in people realizing that they need to look locally, regional food sheds are important, maybe I should even grow it myself, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
So I'm going to just maybe go a little philosophical on you, if that's okay.
Absolutely, love it.
Cool. So I do believe we're living at a very unique moment in human history, and I think COVID was the beginning of a new way forward to creating a new world. And I mean that in the best of ways. And so what I find fascinating is that I think by and large human beings are disconnected, right? So something like 100 years ago, just 100 years ago, almost 100% of the population was involved in agriculture in some way, shape, or form. Agriculture was a way of life for everyone. Yeah. We were deeply connected to earth and to the rhythms of nature to simply live on the earth. You had to be connected to it. And today, fast forward to today, only like 1% of our society is actually farming or even involved in the agricultural process. So 100 years ago, 100% to 1% today. And
that's
so
a lifetime.
In a lifetime, we've divorced ourselves from connection to our source, which is food and life.
And soil.
And so ultimately soil.
Yeah.
So what happened 4 years ago, we had a really terrible thing happen in our world. We had this global pandemic. It caused great panic and it was very scary for a lot of people and a very terrible thing. At the same time, there was beauty that emerged. And the beauty was this. In the month of May 2020, in the United States, I believe direct farm sales, so that's spring, the percentage of food sold from the farmer directly to the consumer grew 425% year over year. So all of a sudden, Global supply chains were fractured. People were going to the mainline grocery store and the shelves were bare. What did we do? We got to know the farmer in our community. We got to know the very person growing food in our community. And we began to develop a relationship with them. Farmers markets were exploding. The National Gardening Association revealed that 22 million new gardens were planted in America that spring. More than any other point in history since the Victory Garden era of World War II. So all of a sudden, this terrible thing happens, and what our human nature, our instinct, was to reconnect to someone that stewards soil in our community, or to reconnect to our own backyards to begin producing food. And I think that was the beginning of a new way forward. I see more and more people coming to farming, coming to agriculture, getting more in tune with where their food comes from, how that food was produced. And I'm predicting a new world where we begin to regionalize our food sources. And I see a day in the not too distant future where our communities are surrounded by flourishing farms again, and where human beings begin to value food grown in our community, and that keeps food in our community. Do we really want to be importing food from other countries? That's just mind-boggling, right?
Elliot Coleman will always say, food grown with care by people who care. It's like the intention in the food system needs to also be acknowledged. It's not just about growing crops. It's about, what's the intention behind it? Because actually, that's a very intimate thing that we do when we eat food. It's like we're putting it in our bodies.
Yeah.
So to go a step further on this philosophical, I guess we're having a philosophical conversation, but is it really philosophical? I don't know. I do believe that there's an energetic imprint of food, and you're alluding to it, JM, that what we put into our bodies contains energy. It contains a life force. And so you wonder why we're so angry at each other in society today. Why is there so much hate, and why is there so much opposition and failure to see ourselves in the other? It's because we're not eating well. Yes. We're not eating food grown by farmers like you.
Yeah.
By and large, our society is eating food that is devoid of good energy. It's actually filled with rage. The food by and large, our society is consuming food that was grown and produced with rage.
Especially animal products.
Precisely.
That's like the worst.
Yeah. So we're putting anger into our body. We're putting hate into our body. We're putting death into our body. How could our society not be sick?
This podcast is proudly supported by Tessier Greenhouses. Tessier has always been one of my top choices for greenhouses and tunnels. For over 45 years, they've been manufacturing high quality and incredibly strong structures right here in North America. Their products can withstand the heavy snow loads we faced here in the Northeast, and their prices are among the best in the market. Tessier offers excellent service and expertise, always ready to help with customized solutions. I particularly appreciate their commitment to innovation and their willingness to listen to the needs of growers. At the Old Mill, we use several of their Gothic Caterpillar tunnels and micro-tunnel for season extension, and I'm always impressed with their design and build quality. Without companies like Tessier, food sovereignty just wouldn't be possible. So thank you, Tessier, for helping us growers feed our community year-round. You guys rock.
Use promo code MGI10 for 10% off your first order and free shipping in select regions.
This episode is brought to you by New Society Publishing. For over 40 years, New Society has been at the forefront of publishing books that inspire positive change all over the world. Farming isn't just about hard work, it's also about knowledge, and it's also about stories. And that's where New Society comes in. They published my first book, The Market Gardener, which has brought thousands of people to the world of small-scale farming. And I can tell you, friends, New Society is more than a publisher. They are a driving force in the movement toward a better and greener future. Hop over to newsociety.com, check out their books, and use the promo code SmallFarm25 to get 25% off on all of their books. It's a sweet deal, friends. New Society Publishers, cultivating change one page at a time. I love this. Now let's get back to our program. Okay. From all my time being involved with Rodale, I don't think I've seen a lot of work on animal husbandry. Is that something that's in the plan or not yet? Or
Well, first of all, we do quite a lot of work. So first of all, yes, we are very focused on animals and
okay,
agriculture.
it's just I haven't seen it.
Rodale's stance is that animals are a tool to improve the health of the soil. We just launched, and you can read about this on our site, but we now have regional campuses. So we have campuses in Iowa, Georgia, California, the Pacific Northwest, and in Europe. And our campus in Iowa just launched a new long-term trial called the integration of crops and livestock. So we're beginning to study when you bring ruminants into a crop rotation, how those ruminants can improve the health of the soil in that rotation. So that's our newest long-term study, and we're very focused on introducing animals to agriculture. At our main campus in Pennsylvania, we have a long-term study that's involving the pasturing of hogs, of pastured pork.
Okay.
And again, we're using the hogs to improve the health of the soil. So Rodale does believe that animals belong in agriculture and that they're a tool to improve the health of the soil.
Okay.
I want to I'm going to remember to come back to that. I want to talk about divisiveness in that regard in the culture. But before we even go there, just to finish off the philosophizing we were doing, speaking to the growing with care and intention, it just made me think of an experience I had recently where I ate a meal in the city, and I didn't know this restaurant. I just showed up. It was for a friend's birthday party, and the restaurant's supposed to be amazing. People love this restaurant, and I just felt complete apathy for it. I was like, I don't really see anything special here. Come home the next day, I eat at a small place in town, actually really close to here, and I know the chef. I know him and his girlfriend who own the restaurant and run it, and I love the meal. And for me, it's not so much about, it wasn't really necessarily the cooking. Like the one in the city was, I think it was well made, probably. I mean, it tasted good, but it was this connection to the story and the meaning behind it that for me just makes such a difference. And I feel like once, to you saying, I know that you say, once I saw, I couldn't unsee. And it's like, once you know the meaning and the connection that you can have with food by knowing the people that made it and knowing where it came from and having them talk to you about it and talking with them about it, you can't, like, it's hard to have a meal anymore that doesn't have that. I'm just like, this is just sustenance now. It's not really a meal.
Yeah.
You ever had feelings like that?
Last night, actually. So I've been in Montreal for 2.5 days now, in Quebec, and spent the first day in the city of Montreal. And on Saturday night, I ate, I think, at what was purportedly one of the best restaurants, and it was a fine meal. It was a terrific experience. And then I came here last night and ate food from your farm with JM out here on the patio, and I literally got to walk the farm before the meal. And then I got to sit down and one by one learn about each of the ingredients. And the chef was explaining, why he prepared what he prepared. And it was one of the best meals of my life. I'm not going to lie. Last night was one of the most incredible.
Dan, did you hear that?
It was one of the most incredible nights of my life, because one of the most incredible meals of my life, because I got to have such an up close and personal experience with the food I was consuming and the energy of that food and the people growing that food that was surrounding me. So I'm so with you in what you experienced yourself. And I agree that humans, the human heart can be transformed by food. I truly believe that the food we put into our body can actually transform our way of seeing the world, our way of relating to each other, and our way forward as a society. And so I believe that agriculture is actually the great healer of our time. We're living at a time of great divide, of great uncertainty. But I think hidden behind all of that noise is actually this great reconnection. More and more people are coming back to the land. They're coming back to the soil. They're coming back to health. And, all the way, earlier in our conversation, you were talking about men's health, and people, their sort of entry into health is, I want to get a 6-pack or I want to lose weight. But the deeper they go on their health journey, it takes them all the way back to the source, which is food and life and agriculture. And
culture.
And so, agriculture, our friend Farmer John, or Krista Barfeld, says that agriculture is the culture.
Yeah. She was at our podcast
just a week or two ago.
Oh, she was?
Yeah.
Oh, she's a great friend and a great person.
She's great.
Yeah.
But it's really amazing that it circles back to here, because that's exactly why I opened the restaurant. Because when people come and eat, they have, they'll see me on TV or they'll read about the work that we do, but when they come here, they see the farm and they eat it. They eat the produce, and then it's a real intimate experience for them. And so the whole message of eating locally, eating in season, eating fresh, healthy, it becomes a real thing.
What struck me last night, and you and I were talking, I mean, their names shall remain nameless, but I've had other farm to table experiences, many of whom have been on Netflix, and there's been a lot of hype around those experiences, and they were fine. But what struck me last night about the meal that we shared together was the authenticity of it.
Yeah.
There was so much love and simplicity woven into the food that we consumed. No one was trying to impress anyone by the food that was put on that plate. It was about deep love and connection and seasonality and intentionality and care.
Yeah, yeah.
And I felt it.
What were some of the dishes, if you want to?
Well, last night we had, one of my favorite we had a heirloom tomato that was on the barbecue, like a steak, and it had XO sauce, which is a miso sauce, had a little bit of crunchiness in it, flowers over it. It's a really beautiful dish.
And that celery thing that we still don't know what that was.
Celtis, which is a mix between like a kind of a hybrid. It's not a hybrid, I just learned. It's kind of an old variety, but it's kind of the heart of a salad. Looks like a celery.
Yeah, yeah.
Really nice. We had that. We also had, we had what
a lot of edible flowers.
Edible flowers. Yeah,
I feel different today. I feel good.
It was a good meal, and we had some natural wine, which I didn't think that you still drank wine because of
I rarely drink anymore, but I actually wanted to share a little bit of wine with you because it was a special moment that I wanted to share with you, and then we got to drink a local natural wine.
Yeah.
That was so quite good.
Wine is one area where when we're talking about health and produce, and it's like wine, if I go to the airport and I drink red wine, one glass, I'll have a major headache. And the next day I'll feel totally, if I drink natural wine, which is nothing than grapes pressed and there's no chemicals in it, it's not the same.
Yeah.
Like I can have a few glasses. Yeah. And this is one area where, for me, like as a wine, I'm interested in wines. I like wine. I like people who make wine. But you really see the difference between food that is like industrialized and food that is not. And it's a direct relationship with how you feel with it. It's like direct.
Yeah.
It's similar with, continue.
No, that's just like, because it's hard for people to taste it. You'll eat a carrot and another carrot. You won't feel sick. But wine, you'll feel sick.
I was going to say feels like it's similar with pasta. Like I know there's people that are very passionate about, there was a restaurant in New Jersey. I'm forgetting the name now because maybe you know it, but the owner had, I think his wife or his son had major health problems, and they went to Italy. And he found that in Italy, in a particular region, this particular type of wheat, he was able to eat it as much as he wanted and feel totally fine.
Yeah.
Whereas at home, he felt 100% gluten intolerant and just incapable,
Yeah.
I don't know enough about it to tell you more, but do you know anything about that? Have you heard?
No. But here's what I do know is that, going back to my health journey 7.5 years ago with Lyme disease, I got deeply in tune with how my diet could impact the way I felt. And so Lyme disease is a very complex illness. It's known as a chronic illness. It becomes systemic after a certain point if you don't catch it early enough. And it causes a lot of inflammation in the body. And so there's something called the Lyme diet, which I followed almost to a T for about 2 years. And I truly believe that was the hallmark of my healing, was just following this diet. And the diet is basically no gluten, no dairy, no sugar, no alcohol. And I followed that diet so closely. And I really just would almost, like, eating became like a meditation to me, where I would think about the food and where the food came from. And I would picture myself eating it and getting healthier. And little by little, I began to feel myself literally heal, because I was focusing on high quality, nutrient dense, organic foods produced either in my own garden or from farmers that I knew. So food became my greatest healer, and to this day is still my greatest healer.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to that energetic imprint of food.
Yeah. And then now that you've healed yourself, you can go back to eating a piece of pie.
A little bit, I think, in moderation, but I tend to, it's funny. You and I last night were talking about leadership, and about how we show up and how we feel as leaders, really matters. And I take this very seriously in my new role as CEO of Rodale, where I want to, if I believe that if Jeff Tkach is healthy, then Rodale will be healthy.
Yeah.
So I really try to work very hard on my health. And I try to really make my diet the foundation to how I feel. So what I put in my body impacts how I think and feel and show up. So yeah, once in a while, do I have something indulgent? Of course. I'm a human, and I think it's important.
Yeah, we had great dessert last night. There wasn't any sugar though.
But there was tallow in that dessert, dessert, which is quite healthy for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do really try to. I truly believe that food is my medicine. So I try to stick to it to the best of my ability.
I like that as a message because that's reality. That's how it is, and not enough people know that.
Yeah.
And I just wish more people understood that better. Like healthy food comes from healthy soil, creates health. It all, the Rodale, the initial, it's so right on. It's so true.
And by the way, the byproduct of all that is, that the planet gets healthier too.
Yeah.
Like our science has proven that the way we farm can actually positively impact the climate probably faster than any other mechanism out there. So if we want to talk about living on a healthy planet, let's start with agriculture. It's really the path to a better world. Like you guys are at the leading edge of where our world is going.
Well, it's funny you say that because, and I'll let you talk after, Chris, but when I was, I want to go back to the Institute, to the Rodale Institute. I've been there twice now.
You're always welcome.
Like sitting in the library, the old library, and having all these books, especially those books by Bob Rodale. Mm-hmm. He did so much writing about the work that he was doing in different countries and farming systems. And these are all the things that I'm doing. Really, like I'm not reinventing things. I'm just kind of perhaps advertising for a type of farming. But
you're pointing us back.
Yeah, but this is nothing new. And I'd like to go back and sit and read all these books because it feels like if we're not pushing these things, they'll kind of like the forces that we're competing against. They're they're better funded, they're better organized, institutionalized. But it's really up to many of us to kind of just push the dot, have the language, communicate about these things, but I just feel that it's nothing new under the sun. There's this kind of feeling that now Rodale has momentum, and I hope that it will keep that momentum because once you kind of not have it anymore, it fades away.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Well, that's why this is such an important moment for our work. And, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that, we're, as a nonprofit, we rely on individual people to believe in what we're doing and support that work. And so, there's an opportunity for everyone listening to get engaged in Rodale. I would encourage all of you listening to follow us on social media, to come to one of our events at one of our campuses around the nation or around the world. And consider supporting our work. As a nonprofit, we rely on private philanthropy to do what we do, and it takes a village. It takes enough people getting behind us, and right now we do have momentum. And so this is a critical moment for the world to get behind Rodale and you and many other people that are trying to change the paradigm for the future of food and human health.
Do you hear some critics of the work that's being done at Rodale? Are you aware of some critics that are out there?
All the time. There was, not just Rodale itself, but everyone wants to criticize organic. There's a huge demonization happening afoot of organic. And
I wanted to ask you about
this whole regenerative movement, all the money that's flowing into, quote, regenerative agriculture and all the corporate interests that are behind that are really trying to demonize organic. There's a lot of negative, inaccurate press right now about organic's ability to feed the world, about organic agriculture's ability to improve the climate. I just take you back to our science and to 44 years. No one has done long-term science other than Rodale to really prove. And it's really sad, that people want to vilify a movement that is so important right now.
I want to touch on that because my initial foray into health was out of the fitness world. I was a personal trainer and strength and conditioning coach at Rutgers University.
You should have seen him. Like he was.
And
dude, you were jacked. Look at you now. You're still pretty strapping.
But at that time,
that's so cool.
Of course, I got into healthy eating just by virtue of, when you're working out like that, you want to.
That's awesome.
But I wasn't thinking about farming yet. I just viewed it as like, can I find things that are healthy for, working out and being healthy? Just like a lot of people. And I couldn't see the leap. Okay, no, I know what I wanted to say. What I would notice is that at the time I followed a lot of evidence-based people that were very science nerdy in the fitness world, and a lot of them were super anti-organic food. They really I idolized them as evidence-based people because they were saying other truths in the fitness world that was saturated by a lot of bro science. They were kind of giving people the goods. But they were like, organic, it's complete BS. Like, don't buy that. Like, it's
Eat my creatine product with all these things you can't even pronounce on the back of the label.
To them, it was just a meaningless price markup meant to make money. And I'm like, but this was at the same time that I actually moved to a farm, or like right around the same time. And I instantly saw, at least for me, that like perhaps my farm couldn't prove to the consumer like what was the nutrient content of our tomato. But what I saw, and it connects to something one of you said, is that like our health can then make the environment healthy and the whole world healthy.
How did you make the leap from strength and conditioning to farming?
Oh, that's a whole long story. I don't know if I'll go too deep into that yet, but
you should at some point though, because that's really interesting.
But what I am trying to say is like, I viewed it that like, yeah, I can't tell you the nutrients of our tomato, but I can tell you about how healthful this entire enterprise is of us growing this stuff and how we're growing it and your experience. And like, it's not just about you and your body, it's about the whole world. And it was so clear to me once I saw that, but like the people couldn't, and I think this actually also goes back to, do you know Wendell Berry? His writing, Unsettling of America. He talks a lot about how we've over compartmentalized and over specialized in our society in modern times. And by virtue of that, we've broken away the wholeness of things and
we've disintegrated ourselves.
Yeah. And this comes back to that. Like people are just, I'm just a health nut in the gym and all I care about is the vegetable that you're giving me and whether or not you have any data to say what the nutrients are in it, and that's it. And I'm like, yeah, but what about everything else? What about how it was farmed and how that affected the community and the environment? And all these things are connecting quite beautifully in my head right now.
Yeah. Ask someone about the energetic imprint of their food, and then you'll get them thinking. You know, anyone that wants to spout on about their science, just go take your shoes off and go walk in nature and go walk the roads where your food came from and begin to sense and taste and feel and smell and presence yourself in that, like we did last evening before we sat down to the meal. And come on, you can't argue with your soul.
That actually says in simplest form, you asked how I took a leap. A lot of it was that I was very disillusioned with being a personal trainer in a gym because I felt like I couldn't actually give people what I think would really help them. I wanted to tell them, you need to go outside and play. Like, this is not good for you. Like, this is not what you want. I'm boring you. And at the same time, I got really into like outdoor natural movement and I started a business teaching parkour in nature. And I did that on my farm. But like this whole world of, I think it was a love for nature and being in nature just automatically set me down that path. I feel like you have something similar in your story.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot to talk about after this conversation. That's amazing. That's really cool.
For me, it's so exciting. Like for having been on a farm for all these years, is to have all these people that are not farmer themselves, but are really working so hard to support farming, organic farming, regenerative farming. And so, the podcast is about that also. It's about having guests here that are actively working to help promote that work, which is important because, when we're outside in the field, we're working the farms, all that we're talking about now today, which is super hopeful and delightful, we tend to forget about that because we're doing our chores, we're busy, we have all our struggles and our problems, but to remember that we're part of a bigger question, a bigger quest, a bigger mission. And I've said this a few times on this podcast, but I myself felt that at many points in my life, it wasn't me anymore that was doing the work. It was just this higher force.
There's something greater than you.
Yeah, it's like the book that I wrote, how popular it is, how influential it has been. It's not really me. It's
a calling.
Yeah, it's something that's out there. And I felt that in different instances where it's just like this needs to happen. Yeah. It's unfolding.
Do you find that same force, whatever that force is, that has been guiding you, provides for you, like at the right moment, whether you experience that through nature on your own farm or through opportunities that come to you? Do you feel like there's something larger than you guiding you?
Yeah, I feel that there's a force at work trying to reestablish our connection with Earth.
So do I.
And I think farming is one of the great way to do that. And farming and being related to that. But one thing that I've learned over the last few years is that when I was younger, I would tend to think that we need to heal the earth. That was where I was coming. I came into farming in that kind of mindset. Like we need to fix what was broken, and we need to start farming to heal the earth. But what I've learned, and you met my wife, Modelaine, last night, is that it's actually, when we're farming, it's the earth that is healing us. It's the other way around. It's like that connection to the soil and to that is really what grounds us and makes us conscious of certain things and at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And so now I carry this much more with me than before. Like I really feel that being in contact with the soil is what is healing me, and then I'm part of the web of healers.
It's so beautiful. Yeah.
So
I feel the exact same way.
Yeah, it's so great. And you were telling me that how you bike back to the institute and the farm, and it's just like, it's not just an office somewhere. It's part of something,
Yeah. It's and this is perhaps for another conversation, but I'm very passionate, and something I want to talk with you about is like, how can Rodale partner with you? And you have such a massive influence on new and establishing farmers. How can we work together to make sure that our farmers are healthy? That I dream of a day where our farmers are role models for the rest of society for health. It's kind of sad when you look at the average American farmer, they're often the most unhealthy individual people. And farming is hard, and it requires great sacrifice and long hours and little sleep.
Do you remember Stephanie Wang what she told us on this podcast?
Oh yeah. She said something similar.
Yeah, she said, farmers, like they're very exploitive people.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's kind of true when you work on a farm, and not all the farmers are, nice folks. They're very directive, but she said because they exploit themselves.
Yeah.
They're the first one to kind of override their own feelings to just get it done.
That's right.
And that's a tough one, Jeff, because you do need to be like really dedicated and passionate, and you do need to put the work, because otherwise, just it's not just like a meeting that you can call off when you're feeling better. The work needs work. But I would think, honestly, if there's good markets and you can make a good living, that really helps a lot. The struggle to make a decent livelihood is the worst, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So just like,
but even just, I think that there's some work we could do together to help inform farmers how they can build health into their lifestyle, into their profession. There's even in little ways, like learning about how to connect with breath work or meditation,
how to
or
stretch,
movement, basic movement, natural movement, for example. I think there's these tools that we could begin to equip our new and aspiring farmers to bring with them as a lifestyle. Farming should be a way of life, right? Yeah. And it should be a way to a healthy life. It's funny. Do you know what the number one recommendation I give to a lot of the aspiring and farming that are following the work that we do? And that's the thing. It's like the most important thing that I can teach you is this: drink a lot of water. It's like, so simple, but so profound, right?
And so many farmers, they finish their day, they're like, hey, I drank like 5 coffees, but I don't think I had a cup of water all day.
And then let me have a beer on top of that.
Brutal. Yeah. And it's like, man, you need to be carrying your jug, and you need to be drinking at least 2 liters a morning. And, I've experienced that myself, like so busy, so hustling, running over, not taking the time to drink water. And it's the basics.
Yeah.
The basics.
To be continued.
Yeah.
I wanted to chime in with something so when you were at Rodale, you recorded a little interview with Jeff, and I had watched this because I edited
Jeff
it.
Moyer.
And me as well. With you,
and Jeff. Okay.
And it was in that little interview that you actually said, after you finished, Alex, our filmmaker, was filming B-roll, and I could hear what you guys were talking about. And you said to Jam, do you have a podcast? Why don't you have a podcast? I think you would have a really great podcast.
Yeah, I don't remember
And
that.
Believe it or not, it was around the same time that we kind of, we had the idea of making a podcast for some years, but it was just always a bit of an idea floating in the ether. But I'd say you were one of the influences at the moment that was kind of like, he's right. Let's do it now.
Hey, JM, I'm so glad you have a podcast.
So now that I've said that, in that conversation, you also brought up a cool Japanese word that you taught JM that day.
Yeah, I remember that.
Ikigai.
Can you tell us what that means, and also what is your ikigai?
Yeah, sure. So in the Japanese culture, your ikigai is that which gets you out of bed in the morning. It's your purpose. It's your why. It's your reason for being. My ikigai is to reconnect humans with the earth. I think we live at a time in human history where many of us are disconnected. We're divorced from the rhythms of nature, particularly food, and where our food comes from, how our food was produced, who produces our food, the energy of our food. And so that's my mission and I'm so fortunate to get to live out that mission through the context of my work at Rodale. I'm so honored to do this job at this moment in history. And I take it very seriously. And so I would say that, Rodale is my ikigai, but there's a deeper passion and reason for being that drives me to be excellent at what I do. And it's because I think human beings need to be reintroduced to the earth. And so that's the urgency to our work.
Yeah, and I want to say this. I think you are excellent. I think you are doing excellent work, Jeff, because I've seen you at work, and
thank you.
Leadership is important.
Yeah. Well, I still have a long way to go, and I have to recognize the amazing human beings that I get to work with every day. We've attracted such incredible people to this mission. They're just, I'm surrounded by incredibly talented and passionate and inspirational people that I get to do this work with. And so I love every one of them.
What about, how do you live out your ikigai outside of work? What's your off work?
Yeah. I've been really putting a lot of effort and energy on developing good relationships with a couple of good friends, like good male friends in particular. I think a lot of men, particularly men in leadership, are often very isolated and it could be, leadership could be very lonely. And I've really put a lot of emphasis in the last couple of years on developing a couple of really good friendships that are built on a profound foundation of openness and connection. So I'm very fortunate to have friendships. I also love to build a beautiful home with my wife. My wife and I live in a barn that we've repurposed into a home. And so we've had a lot of fun regenerating our home and building gardens in the back. And we love to cook and spend our weekends going to farmers markets. And then I also love to move. So when I'm not working, you can usually find me doing some form of natural movement, or I love to ride a bike, or go surfing is my ultimate highest expression.
That's something that we shared together. We want to find ourselves on the same wave.
We should meet and go for a surf in Maine this fall.
Yeah.
That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of really beautiful community where you live? You get that sense?
I do. Living and working in the same community can have its pluses and minuses. Sometimes I need to leave to go, somewhere like here to get re-inspired. So I'm very fortunate to call the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania home, because it's surrounded by amazing farms and agriculture and beautiful recreation and countryside. And I also love to travel to meet farms and to meet farmers and to see farms. That's one of my other passions as well.
All right, let's do some rapid fire, but they're not really that rapid, as we always say. This is the funny segment where we call rapid fire, but it's not rapid.
This is my favorite part.
What book have you read many times?
The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma. And I just bought it. He's one of my favorite authors, but that's sort of like a go-to. And then he just put out a book called The Saint, the Surfer, and the CEO. And when I saw that, I'm like, wait, what?
Is that for you?
So I actually just ordered that, and I'm looking forward to reading
What's the book about?
It's about leadership.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why is it so special to you? Just
because it's the book that always brings me back to the Jeff I want to become. Yeah. So Robin Sharma writes a lot about what it means to become the fullest expression of leadership, and the highest expression of ourself is to be a leader no matter what we do in life.
What advice did you hear when you were really young, but you didn't appreciate it until a lot later in life?
I had a friend one time when I had just graduated college, and he was a mentor of mine. And he said something to me that haunted me for a long time, but then it finally made sense. But he said, and it was so simple, he said, "Jeff, you're an obvious leader. You're an obvious leader." And that haunted me for a long time. What did he mean when he said you're an obvious leader? And I followed that question my entire adult life. But I do believe that I was called to leadership. It's a calling. It's it's beyond a choice. It's actually something that I can't do anything other than lead.
What's advice that you give really often to people?
To eat fresh, wholesome, organic food grown in healthy soil by really healthy people.
Yeah,
Classic.
you really say that coming from a strong.
Coming from deep within me.
Yeah.
What's something that people are not talking about enough?
The miracle that is soil. Soil is alive. It's our life force. It's the reason we are here on this earth, and it's something that we should not take for granted.
You know, I just want to say something about soil. It's like, I was remembered, I don't know who, I think it was someone in this podcast, but remembering that when we all die, if we fall down, we just go back to the soil.
It's a return.
It's really powerful when you think about it. It's like we are from the soil and we will go back to the soil, whatever happens.
That's right.
Yeah, it's profound.
It's profound.
Simple.
Yeah. And quite peaceful. The thought of, wow, I just get to return to this cycle, this miracle that is right in front of us. You know, we get so caught up in our wars and religion, and we all want to be right, and everyone wants their dogma to be heard. But it's like, here's something we can all agree on. There is an obvious miracle happening right before us that we stand upon every moment of every day, which is soil. There's a rhythm to it all. There's something everlasting in that cycle that we can't deny.
When you think about your work and what you do, what makes you feel the most pride?
The people. Yeah, the people that have come alongside of us to do this mission. When I get to work minute to minute and day to day with the incredible people that are also giving deep from their own ikigai every day, I mean, that's an amazing feeling.
What's the best difficult decision you've ever made?
To leave my former work and come do this work. So JM knows I used to have a different career path that looked quite a bit different. It had a lot of promises to earn at a high level. It had a lot of opportunities for advancement. I was on a much different path up until 7.5 years ago. But then I got sick, and that sort of reoriented everything for me, and it got me on the path that I'm on today. But it took a decision. There was a deciding moment. It took some sacrifice. It took a little bit of choice and discomfort, but it was so worth it in the end.
And what's a great failure that sticks out in your life? Something that you failed at, but it actually led to something better?
I would say my failure to take care of myself and to be honest with myself at a particular time in my life when I was given all these opportunities and for quote unquote career advancement. I really failed to be honest, and it cost me my health. But in the end, I think that actually happened for me, not to me. So that ended up becoming a real crucial moment.
All right. Well, that's all.
Cool.
Yeah.
This has been an awesome, fantastic,
Yeah.
wonderful conversation.
Yeah,
I'm so grateful.
Well, I'm so grateful that you came down. You brought your lovely wife too, and it was quite the travel to get here. But thank you for coming. And
I'm gonna go back to Rodale tomorrow morning, deeply inspired by our time together. I'm so glad that we're friends and partners, and I encourage you both to continue to do what you do in the world, because the world needs it, and anything Rodale can do to partner to help advance our collective missions, we're all in.
All right, so there you have it, folks. If you want to learn more about Rodale, you can check out their website. All the information's there. I hope you guys liked this podcast. We're going to have another one soon. Chris, Be well, my friend. All right.
Yeah. Cheers.
See you guys later. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. These are important conversations, and we're really excited to have them and to share them with everyone. You can check out the work that we do at the Market Gardener Institute. You can check out our website, themarketgardener.com. Our mission is to multiply the number of small ecological farms around the world. And we do this by offering training, online courses to new aspiring farmers, but also to seasoned growers. We're helping them take it to the next level. So you can check out the work that we do. You can follow us on social media. You can sign up to our newsletter to get a lot of freebies about gardening, farming, but also about how small-scale farming is changing the world. And that's really what we're all about, and that's really what this is all about. So again, super excited that you guys are on board. We are changing the world.